Breakfast with Bob.
Welcome to Breakfast with Bob. My name is Bob Babbitt. We are brought to you by the PTO, the Pro Triathletes Organization, by Amp Human, by VeloFix, Normatec, Form Goggles, UCAN, our Challenged Athletes Foundation. We just sent out 3,921 grants, totaling $5.9 million to athletes in all 50 states and Puerto Rico and 43 countries worldwide. Our next guests, Nick and Chris Nikic. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. We're doing good.
Very cool. Now, Nick, obviously this starts with you. When did triathlon become part of your life?
So a couple of years ago, Chris has just come off a bunch of surgeries on his ears that really made him very sedentary. He gained a lot of weight, was becoming isolated. And so we decided to find something that would get him engaged more. And so we thought triathlon looked like a nice thing because it had so much variety. And Special Olympics of Florida at the same time started a pilot program for Special Olympics athletes to try the triathlon. And so Chris was one of the 4 people that first started that program a couple of years ago.
That is so cool. And early on, when you have a child who has Down syndrome, what were you told in terms of what your child would be able to accomplish?
We were pretty much told that he couldn't so much as tie his own shoes. He would never take care of himself. He would not be able to do things like graduate from school or hold down a job or in any way ever be able to take care of himself. And so we were told to prepare for a lifelong journey where we would have to do everything for him.
It's funny because obviously I'm one of the founders of our Challenge Athletes Foundation, and this is not an uncommon story where parents are basically told your child, you're going to be warehousing a child for his entire life. And when did you realize that you had somebody who was very unique in Christopher?
So it was interesting. It was actually up until a couple of years ago, we did everything we could to help him develop and be able to do more, but we never actually pushed him as far as we should have. It wasn't until 2 years ago when he started with the triathlon.
Yeah.
But, and it took about 6 or 9 months, even in that journey, to start to see some potential that we never saw before. So it didn't just happen all at once. We were into it probably a good year before a light bulb went off. And in that journey, I started to see things and learn things that I had never seen before. So I got pretty engaged in his journey through the triathlon. And through his development as a triathlete, I started to see both his physical and cognitive ability improving at a dramatic rate, one that I've never seen before. And once I saw that trigger, then we started to actually double down on it. And over the last year, he made dramatic improvements, both in his intellectual as well as his physical ability, to the point where clearly he's now completed half an Ironman, and he's doing public speaking, where we're teaching him how to deliver speeches. Starting with last year, he did one actually last June in front of 1,000 people, and now he can deliver a 20-minute speech from memory. And I never thought that he had the cognitive ability to be able to learn 20 minutes worth of content and be able to deliver a speech in front of 1,000 people.
It's funny, I think people underestimate the power of sport. And you guys are living, breathing examples of the power of sport. So, Chris, what is it about triathlon? Because you'd obviously been in other sports. What was it about triathlon that you liked?
I liked the swim and the bike.
Yep.
It's kind of hard for the bike because the hands are shaky.
Your hands are shaky,
Yeah, when he's on a bike for 4 hours, his hands shake.
Just like all of us.
Yeah. And what else hurts?
The butt.
The butt hurts, and his butt hurts. And what do you like most about triathlon when you go to the races?
The running.
And then what about all the other stuff around it?
And the ladies.
The ladies. What do you like about the ladies? What do they do? What do they give you?
Hugs.
Hugs.
The hugs.
Is that part about triathlon?
Yeah.
So that's it for Chris. It's the ladies, the people, the hugs, the community.
There you go. So how hard has all of this been, Chris? Where you haven't been able to go and do the workouts you like to do with all your friends? I saw something where every day you were doing Zumba classes and yoga classes and spin classes and basketball, and you're like one of those guys who plays every sport on the planet. Not being able to do that with your friends, has that been hard?
I've been taking Zumba with ladies. I've been taking yoga with ladies.
So, but you missed it for 2 or 3 months because the gym was closed. So he said, how was that when you missed all that for 2 or 3 months? How did you feel? Look at him. Don't look down. Tell him how you felt being isolated.
It was pretty hard, I bet.
Okay.
Yeah. So that way you just have your dad to work out with. That's tough. You want other people. More hugs.
We were fortunate because the triathlon club in Florida
Yeah.
actually created an environment where they started training with him. So they would go to the lake and swim with him. They would go to the club and work with him. They would run with him. So he didn't have his friends and he didn't have the regular community at the gym, but we had a little bit of that with the Tri Club. They were so gracious and wonderful in working with Chris that they created a little bit of a social environment so that he could have something to continue on with.
Nick, what was the toughest part for Chris in terms of the triathlon itself? Was it the bike?
The bike is the hardest part for him because with someone with Down syndrome, you have a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
One of those limitations is balance, the ability to balance because of the way the brain works and the way the whole makeup works. Balance is really hard. It took 6 months of holding him for him to learn how to balance by himself. And it wasn't until that was done and through enough repetition where he could ride around the block by himself and then stop and start by himself. And so the bike was the hardest. But eventually, he went from riding, 3, 5 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour to where he can go up to speeds of 27, 28 miles an hour now.
Now, do you guys train together or
as much as I can, I train with him, but he's got other people who train with him, including his Special Olympics unified partner who does all of the races with him. So for instance, tomorrow morning, he's going to do a 60-mile bike ride. And he's got 2 ladies from the Tri Club coming at 7 in the morning to do it with him. So they encourage him, they help him, they work with him, and they make it fun for him.
That is the coolest thing. Chris, what has been your favorite race to do so far?
The Ironman.
Ironman was your favorite?
Yeah.
The 70?
Yeah.
Oh, 70.3.
Yes.
And was that the one?
Sorry, Bob, we lost you for a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, which Ironman did you do?
So we created our own when the Ironman in Florida was canceled May 9th.
Yes.
We replaced it with the Orlando COVID 70.3.
You did your own race right around the house?
We did it in Claremont. The Tri Club put it together. About 100 people showed up. People came from Tampa, Jacksonville. Susan Haig came from Jacksonville with her group of friends, and we actually did a half Ironman in Claremont on our own. The local news station was there to capture it all. The police came to stop it, but then they walked away. They realized that it wasn't a good idea.
So the goal is for Chris to become the first Down syndrome athlete to finish a full Ironman, correct?
That's correct. And he's already become the first to finish a half Ironman, so that's never been done.
How did that feel, Chris, to finish that half Ironman?
Sore.
Sore.
Stuck and crooked.
Chris, what is when you're doing the race itself, what is your favorite part? Do you enjoy the swim, the bike, or the run better than the others?
The run.
Because it's last, right? After that you'll be able to get hugged. Now, do you ever stop on the race course and hug people?
Yeah.
All the time.
So the time doesn't really matter much. It's all about having fun. Yeah.
The clock only matters to finish on time.
To finish cutoff times, right? Yeah.
Other than that, it's really the journey along the way. He stops and gives people hugs, high fives.
He
enjoys the whole journey.
Chris, what's your favorite pre-race meal?
Waffle House.
Waffle House, what do you get?
2-egg breakfast.
2 eggs, bacon, that type of thing?
Scottish hash browns.
Hash browns.
Covered with chili.
What is it now? Is your coach still Daniel Grebe?
Yes.
And how important has he been to you, Chris, in terms of helping you?
How important is Coach Dan? What do you call Coach Dan now?
Uncle.
Uncle. That's how important Coach Dan is.
Okay, that says it. You can sum that up in one word.
I'll become Uncle Dan.
So you mentioned earlier, Nick, about the importance of you seeing that the physical part of this has helped the cognitive part of this. What are the goals, besides Ironman, what are the goals for Chris down the line?
So the goal is really independent living.
Yes.
Right? Independent living comes from the ability to have a job, right? To be able to make decisions, to live in a community. And so for him, what we figured out by accident was when we put him in front of 1,000 people to deliver a 6-minute speech, he absolutely nailed it. And so we thought, look, there's all kinds of ways to make a living.
Yeah, absolutely.
Building a story around something that's never been done, and having a message you can deliver that makes a difference to other people's lives in terms of inspiration and giving them a vision for what they can accomplish. That sounds like a good story. And so becoming a public speaker, a motivational speaker, sounds like a good way to make a living. Okay, we'll talk about this in a minute, buddy. Hold on. Well, let me finish my answer.
House, car, and wife.
So it's about independent living and making a living. So public speaking looks like the vehicle for him. He's got about 8 or 10 engagements already scheduled this year to do speaking in different schools and different corporations. And so after he does Ironman, that story should resonate even more.
No
and
question.
make a really good story. So that's the next thing for Chris, is to be a public speaker and be able to go deliver his message and motivate others like him to do the same.
So one of the things you're doing, Chris, which is great, is you're changing perceptions about what someone can do with Down syndrome. Do you feel like a role model? Do you feel that people are following your lead and learning from you?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about you.
They can't tell me.
No, they don't.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
All right, talk to the man.
And Nick, for you, this journey, like you said, Chris was getting in the triathlon, then he had a couple of years with the ear surgeries and gained some weight, and then you had to start over, really sort of start over again. Couldn't run 100 yards, couldn't really swim a lap in a pool. That going through that again had to be tough. But now that you've gotten through that, what do you see just in terms of the speaking is great, but being a role model for other people with Down syndrome, how important is that?
Yeah, it's really important, right? We go through life, and if you don't have a sense of purpose, something that you're doing that you wake up every day and you feel good about it and you make a difference in other people's lives, then life is really about playing video games or sitting around or just working, right? It's a boring existence. But when you're living life with a purpose, and I believe Chris has been given a God-given purpose to make a difference in other people's lives and be an example and an inspiration on how they can achieve their dreams and live a more fulfilling life, that makes me feel really good, because I know that he's going to have a purpose-driven life for the rest of his life, where he really will make a difference in people's lives. And then the economics of it are going to be okay, right? Once you kind of have the basics, right? The economics are the economics, but the making a difference is really what makes life worthwhile. And I feel like our son now has a sense of purpose that will give him a rich, really enjoyable life, that he's going to be part of a community, the Ironman community, the Special Olympics community, that really embraces him and sees him as someone who sets an example, so that others can also live a more a rich life and really realize more of their dreams. And so, Chris will also tell you, because when we started doing all this wasn't easy, as you said, right? And so we developed this plan called 1% Better, because we needed to develop something that was simple for Chris to follow, simple for him to be able to explain, right? And simple to execute. So we started with this concept of, hey, let's just go do 1 push-up, 1 sit-up, 1 squat, right? And then do 1 more the next day. And then let's go ride the bike 1 block. And then let's do 1 more the next day. Let's go swim a lap and then do 1 more the next day, right? We realized Chris could do 1 more of anything from day to day to day. And when you string it together over 2 years, you end up going from 0 to Ironman. And all of a sudden you look back and say, well, that wasn't that hard. All we did was get 1% better each day. So that's what Chris is doing is that's what made it easy, is to do it progressively, slowly over time.
And it's funny because so many folks who got into things like the Ironman, the way you broke it down was so important. So you didn't think, oh my God, I'm swimming 2.4 miles. It was, hey, I'm a quarter of the way to the turnaround. I'm halfway to the turnaround. I'm halfway done with the swim. Now I get to ride my bike. So it's that 1% a day is basically how you take the race itself, right? You try to get through one part of it at a time and not put too much pressure on yourself to think about the whole meal. Just take it one little bit.
So this is a mind game that you go through. And so for Chris, right, part of what we're developing is the mind game part of this thing.
Yeah.
Right? We built an entire system around this 1% where, like Saturday, I just said to you, he's going to ride 60 miles. Well, we don't talk about riding 60 miles. What we do is we do 6 rounds of 10, right? And so he counts. He says, okay, we're on round 1. We're doing 10 laps, 10 miles. Great, we're done. We stop for 2 minutes, take a gel, take a drink. And then Chris says, great, we're on round 2 now. Let's go. Then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good, we're done with round 2. Now we're round 3. And then he says, hey, where are we, Dad? Oh, we're in round 4. Look, we're almost done. Round 4, round 5, now round 6. It's all that. So it's a very systematic approach. Everything we do is like that. It's 6 rounds of 10. It's 3 rounds of 5. And so in his mind, he's counting down, and he only focuses on the next thing. He doesn't focus on the 17-hour race. He just focuses on, oh, I'm just doing the first round of the swim, the first round of the bike. And before you know it, he's at the end of one set, and he's on. And once he gets to the second half of the rounds, it's like going downhill for him.
There you go.
It's a psychological game that we play that makes it really powerful for him.
Well, everybody plays that game. When you're running a 100-mile race, when you get to mile 50 and you think, oh my God, I've got to do that again, or I'm halfway done.
Yeah,
that whole mindset makes it so much different. I also heard you guys are going to be doing Challenge Daytona. That's one of my favorite events.
Before the half Ironman, the Challenge Daytona was our favorite race. Tell them about the Daytona race. Tell them what you liked about that and what you didn't like about it, because we did that this last year. Remember the Daytona race?
On the racetrack.
The racetrack.
The racetrack. He loved the racetrack.
Isn't that the coolest? I really, really dug that, just being on that racetrack.
He didn't like the tunnel.
Oh, the tunnel's pretty scary.
Oh, it scared him. We weren't ready for that. And it was a rainy day, so he was riding in the rain.
You were a tough young man. So if somebody had, Nick, if somebody told you a couple years ago that Chris would be, at the age of 20, would be speaking in front of groups and training for an Ironman, what would have been your response?
Well, 2 years ago, I looked at him and said, look, I just wanted him to go out and do a little bit of something, get off the couch and do something. If you said to me, he's going to do, even the first time we went to do a sprint triathlon, which was 13 miles, we saw somebody doing an Olympic, which was twice the distance.
Yeah.
And we thought they were off their mind. Like, how in the world can you do a 30-mile triathlon? It just, the concept was just unfathomable to us. And then, you can see with the challenge with speaking, to say he's going to get in front of 1,000 people, deliver a 6-minute or 20-minute speech, and he's going to blow the audience away. I would like, there's something wrong with you when you're even thinking that way. That's what makes the story so phenomenal, is that Chris is actually a living, documented proof of going from almost nothing to just amazing things in a very, very short amount of time, simply by getting 1% better every day.
So, Nick, I'm assuming other parents of Down syndrome children have reached out to you because they've seen the success here of Chris. What's your message been to them?
Our message to them is the greatest lesson we learned is that the reason more kids with Down syndrome don't accomplish more is that we do not understand that their learning curve is upside down compared to the typical person. The typical person learns at a very rapid rate. So if you think about starting from zero, and you say, how does a typical person learn? Well, a typical person learns very quickly, and they accelerate on a curve that goes almost straight up. And then as they reach their potential, it flattens out. Mm-hmm. And then they improve gradually over time. A child with Down syndrome, what I've learned over the last 2 years is their curve is upside down. So just do the exact opposite. It goes flat for a long time, and then only gradually starts to improve. and then it accelerates rapidly and it gets them almost to the same point as a typical person. So over a 2-year period, they get to almost the same point. The problem is they took 2 completely routes to get there. And because the world is used to seeing the curve that goes up and flat, when they see someone go flat for a long time, they think that curve is going to stay flat forever. And it doesn't. There's actually a turning point when it accelerates at a dramatic rate. So part of what I've been trying to educate people on is that it's the reason your child isn't accelerating is because you're following the wrong learning path. You need to adapt a different learning path for your child with Down syndrome. And if you're willing to stay on that path for 2 or 3 years, you're going to see absolutely amazing results.
What's fascinating to me is the amount of patience that you have to have, because basically you're seeing no success, right? You feel like, oh my God, we're just beating ourselves against the wall. And when did you realize, because obviously you had to be patient for a long time before, and you didn't know at that point if there was going to be this spike. No. So when did it hit you that, oh my God, we have to change everything in terms of our perception of how our children learn?
About 6 months into it, I'm a metrics guy. So in the corporate world,
yes.
I help companies design and build and measure metrics. I'm what you say, somewhat of an expert on metrics and how to measure things.
Yes.
So I started measuring everything with Chris, and it took about 6 months before I started to see something unusual in the metrics curves. And then all of a sudden I started digging a little deeper, and then about 6 months later, my theory started to get proven out that there's something different going on here. And so I used real metrics, and I saw how the metrics curve actually worked. And about a year into it, I was able to prove out that what was happening was really something I never understood before. And then we accelerated. So then over the next year, we went from literally a sprint to an Olympic, to a half an Ironman in 1 year. So it took us a year to get to just where he can do a sprint,
right,
at a decent pace. Then in less than 6 months, we went from a sprint to a half Ironman.
So I bet now you look back at, ages 5 through 15 and think, why didn't I know this then? We would have been so far ahead of the game.
So now my advice to parents is exactly what you're going, right? Which is, my wife and I would have handled him differently from age 1 to 2, right? So now we're kind of writing down what would be the right blueprint for a child with Down syndrome,
yes,
in order to accelerate from 0 to age 5 to age 10. So you're right. I wish now I knew what I should have known then, right? And we would have raised him completely differently, and he would have been so much further along every step in his journey, instead of waiting till he was 18 to figure this out.
Yeah, but you know what? You had to go through that, and now, because you've gone through it, other people will benefit from that, which is awesome.
We hope so, because it's interesting, right? We're getting an awful lot of people who love what they're seeing and they want to do it, but we're also getting an awful lot of resistance too.
Really?
An awful lot of people who are they own a concept that they believe for 20 years. They don't want to be told that they're wrong.
Yeah. Well, but we've seen that in so many. Yeah, for years with us dealing with kids who needed prosthetics. For years, everybody was like, well, you don't want to give a kid a running leg when he's 4 years old because he's just going to outgrow it. Yeah. You got to wait till he's 14 when he's done growing. Well, then you've spent 14 years of that kid being the last kid picked, right? Of never being an athlete, and that his feet, he's not comfortable in his own skin, and he's not happy. And he's always been that kid looked down upon. So now, our kids are, in terms of challenge athletes, they're getting prosthetic legs whenever they need them. 4 years old, it doesn't matter. If they need another one at 6, they get it then. Same thing with Chris. Yeah. There's no reason that the next Chris can't find out about the sport of triathlon when they're 5, 6, 7 years old.
And that's what we hope to do is use this concept to show parents and others who are working with kids like Chris and others in the Special Olympics community to say, look, we just need to think about it a little differently. Yeah, Chris will never have the same potential as another 20-year-old who's got an IQ of 135, right? And he's 6'4" with a body that was, given to him from the gods, right? Chris will never do that. But you know what? If that kid goes and does an Ironman and Chris does an Ironman, they're both going to finish. That kid might finish in 10 hours and Chris might finish in 12.
Doesn't matter.
You know what? That's the difference that God gave them. Yes. But they're both going to get to the end. And so that's what I'm seeing as the the journey that Chris is on and how he can make a difference for others.
So Chris, your dad is obviously a very special man to have the patience and to be doing what he's doing for you. What do you like about Dad, and how cool is that guy to be able to be with every day?
So every day, we go to gym, and every time when he does a pull-up, and when he comes down and his feet touch the ground, and I said, again,
You make me do more pull-ups.
and then I make him do more because he's a snug,
Yeah,
he's slow,
yeah.
old, weak, and frail.
But how do you feel about your dad? Do you love me or not? That much? Okay, good. I'll take that.
Nick
Love you
and
that much too.
And my mom's announcement about
yeah.
is this.
Oh, so this is mom and dad when we were younger.
Oh, nice.
So tell Mr. Bob your dream. Why are you doing Ironman?
To get a house, a car, and a wife.
So you can get a house, a car, and a wife.
I think that comes with it when you come across the finish line. They just give you your house,
Yeah,
your car,
yeah.
and wife. Right there. Boom. Done.
Get out of here.
I love that. Hey, I want to thank you guys, Nick and Chris, for taking so much time. It was awesome to catch up with you guys. And we'll see you at Challenge Daytona coming up on December 6th. That'll be fun to catch you guys there.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, man.
A pleasure, you guys. Take care. Stay healthy. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.